Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome, my friend. As always, this is the host and founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Brad Wilson, and today's guest is multi-table tournament crusher Bryan Paris. Bryan has over $12 million in online cashes, was the second human in poker history to crack the $10 million mark, and has been crushing the poker tournament scene for the last 14 years. Bryan was incredibly laid back and easy to talk to. It's quite apparent why he's racked up more than 35,000 followers on Twitch and had hundreds of viewers from day one of streaming. In today's episode, you'll learn a clever and effective tactic to make sure you have an edge when you're moving up stakes, why the thought experiment, the prisoner's dilemma, means really bad things for the future of online and live poker, why the folks in the USA who thrive in this day and age of online poker are built to last, and much, much more. So without any further ado, I bring to you the great Bryan Paris. Bryan, welcome to the show, sir. How you doing?
Great. How you been?
I'm doing very well. It's good to have you. Where are you located at right now?
I'm in Haarlem, which is right near Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
Very nice. A lot of online poker options in Amsterdam?
Yeah, all the sites are available here. It's that's the original reason we moved here, is for online poker access. But there are other great reasons to be here as well. But yeah, it's a good place to be for now for online.
I could think of a couple great reasons.
Yeah.
So let's start this show off by telling me the story of how you started playing cards.
Yeah, sure. So I've always been a gamer of growing up. I played a lot of Magic when I'm 35 now, so I guess the game was invented when I was like 7 or 8. And, I got into it pretty early, and I played that a ton growing up all through high school. And then my senior year of high school, some of my friends started a home game for poker. This was 2002. And so we played a bunch of weird variants. We played like baseball and Chicago and stuff like that. And we played a little bit of No Limit Hold'em, because it was in the moneymaker boom was like just kicking off like right after that. But that was my first experiences in this home game with all my friends. I was the second best performing player in the game. One guy won all the money. He didn't actually wind up going pro though. And then I was like even. I was like the second best player, and everyone else was just getting crushed. But then so I went off to college, and I was playing for fun. While going to school, I was playing for fun, but also I was winning because it was pretty easy back then. And so I guess I was just kind of in the perfect time and place. Like I turned 18 the year Moneymaker won the World Series, so I was just like perfectly situated to jump right into online poker from like its boom phase and just kind of go with it from there.
What was so appealing about the game back then that made you want to invest so much time and energy into playing cards?
Well, just the fact that I already enjoyed card games. Now here is one that I could play and make money, and it's like holy shit! I can play online, I can play a card game online, and I can make money. It's like this everything I always wanted to do. It was just really perfect for me. So I very naturally gravitated towards it. And
when did you start seeing some success? Like when did it turn into a viable thing you felt you could do?
So it didn't take that long. So I was a freshman in college. I had my first 8K MTT score like 9 months into my freshman year. Before that, I had some smaller scores and stuff. But I was always consistently making money just to pay the bills and pay my rent and whatever when I was going through college. So I guess the first time I thought I could really go pro was after I graduated. I worked a real job for like maybe 6 weeks, but I was still playing on weekends, and I was making more money on the weekends than I made at the job. And then I won a package to the PCA with all expenses paid, and I didn't have the vacation time or whatever, so I was like, fuck it, I'll just quit. And I'll just try to play poker for a while, and if it doesn't work out, I'll just apply for a job again. And it worked out. So
what was the job? What was your first job?
It was this sort of like financial like vulture type company where they would like call around these smaller companies and make offers to buy them out. I was employed, I would basically cold call people and ask them for like their CEO's contact info, and half the time they'd be like, "Who the fuck are you? Like, why are you asking about this? Like, what are you talking about?" It was not the most fun job. I'm sure I could have worked my way up and done some sort of finance, mergers and acquisitions type shit, but I never really like fit in naturally to like an office lifestyle, I guess. I've always been very individually minded.
So you quit your job, you start playing poker. What did your life look like back then? Like, what was your aspiration as a professional card player?
So I always just wanted that one big score, I guess. I wanted to do it professionally for a while. I wanted to travel. I wanted to go to big tournaments and everything. And so my early years playing MTTs were always spent looking for that one like score to sort of kickstart the bankroll. But even though I never had a score above maybe 30K until like 3 or 4 years into my career, I still managed to string together enough like 10K scores to keep traveling. And I was with my fiance at the time, and we met while traveling. We met while studying abroad at Cambridge. So travel was always sort of an integral part of our relationship. So it was it was nice to be able to fund that sort of like traveling poker player lifestyle with the game from an early time.
She was cool. She was cool with the online poker.
Yeah, we were both young. I met her. I was 21. She was 20, and I never I never really had to work like a real job for a prolonged period of time. So I guess we never experienced like normal working adult life. So we didn't really have the like risk assessment properly baked into our reality at that time, but it worked out just fine anyway. So, I guess basically because I was able to be successful from the get-go, and I've never really had any problems with like covering expenses and giving us a nice lifestyle. It's never really been an issue for us.
So tell me, when you think about pain in your poker career, what's the first memory that comes to mind?
Probably Black Friday. That was rough.
Tell me about that.
So I had the first 3.5 months of 2011 were the best of my career by far. I was just crushing. I was up like 350K in 4 months or something. I had a stretch. I remember documenting it pretty extensively where I cashed 10K or more 14 days in a row, or it was 13 out of 14 days. It was during that full tilt, like double guarantee week or whatever. So I was just crushing. And then I had a lot of money on full tilt. I had like 200K there or something. And they dropped the hammer on Black Friday and all my full tilt money got frozen. And so I think that was really the first time when I went from just like crushing to just like busto in the span of, a month or something through really no fault of my own. I didn't properly risk manage. Like I had other money I should have been more careful with, but I always just sort of assumed I was getting the tilt money within a reasonable time span. So I think that was by far the hardest part of my career, the biggest setback. Like I went from having just this massive bankroll and being on top of the poker world to just like nothing in the span of a couple of months. And it was very difficult to sort of motivate myself to rebuild from there.
Do you remember where you were at when you got the Black Friday news?
Yeah. I was in my house, my apartment in Southern California, like Laguna Niguel, it's in Orange County. And I remember hearing it and I was like, oh, well, I thought like, obviously that's like really bad news, but we didn't know like the extent of just how bad it would be. We thought maybe they'd shut down for a little bit and then come back, or, we thought they'd shut down, but at least we get paid. So I remember my plan at the time, I was like, well, that sucks, obviously. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay here. I'm going to play the World Series of poker, which I played every summer, and then I'll relocate to like Canada or whatever. So I just sort of assumed that I'd be able to relocate my way out of it. And, I did relocate, but I didn't get the full tilt money back for like 3 more years.
When did the full tilt money come back? Was it when Stars bought Full Tilt?
Yeah, Stars bought them out or whatever, and they did the settlement, and then they paid out all the balances. I think it was in like mid 2014 when I got paid.
Yeah, because UB, Absolute Poker, they paid out eventually, but it was like...
I still haven't got paid from them. They owe me like 15K or something. I still haven't paid that.
Oh, there was an opportunity.
I filled out the form and everything, and I've asked them that they're holding it for some reason. I don't know.
Really? Wow, that's interesting.
That actually reminds me, I should email them again. It's been a little bit.
I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago back whenever you could apply.
Oh, I definitely applied right away. I remember someone came to the Twitch chat and was like, oh, shit, UB's paying. I was like, no way. How is that possible? I just wrote that money off forever ago. I never thought I'd see that. And then I filled out the whole thing, and just they have my report on file. They just haven't paid me yet.
I remember, it was blood on the streets. I remember there was a UB reg who I assume was plugged into the corporation, whoever even the corporation of Ultimate Bet was. Right. And he was like buying up people's account balances at like 40 cents on the dollar. Like it was just, it was a very weird time to be a poker player.
I remember having many offers on my full tilt account and contemplating them very deeply, 80 cents on the dollar, 85. I'm glad I didn't, but I was very tempting.
For sure. And maybe if you could have gotten paid immediately, it would have been worth it.
I'd have been worth it, yeah, to help me rebuild faster.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned that it was really hard to get back in there, to get back in the arena. Can you tell me about going through that and what led you to eventually reinvesting yourself full time into poker?
It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't so much hard emotionally. It was more just like my game got fucked up during the off time. Because like when everything was going before Black Friday, I was just firing on all cylinders. I was really on top of stuff, and then when I came back, it was hard. Like I was able to sell action on the 2+2 marketplace pretty easily because of my situation. It was like the perfect situation to sell action, right? It's like I'm busto, but it's through no fault of my own. Like I made all this money, I was really good, so like I had no problem selling action.
When you say bust, like what were you like legitimately very close to?
Yeah, I was like all dusted. I was down to like 10K or whatever.
Wow.
Because I had like 300, 350, going into before Black Friday hits, and then Black Friday hits, and I have like 100 of it on stars or whatever. I was able to cash that out. But then I go to the World Series, and I'm just thinking the whole time during the series, like I'm just gonna fire hard because I'm gonna get all this other money, and I'm like playing really well, and I'm crushing. I'm just gonna fire everything, And so I was down like a decent amount at the World Series, and then the Black Friday news hits, and the full tilt money's all gone. All of a sudden, it's just like holy shit! I go from all this money to just like nothing. I mean, I was a lot younger back then too, so I could have managed the situation in a more conservative fashion, obviously. But I just sort of like blindly assumed that the full tilt money would be coming back a lot before it actually did.
Yeah, so you just went to the WSOP with no reservations to play in your.
Back then it was so easy, like you could dust a roll and just rebuild it. I mean, it's hard to like adjust from this. Like, because on the day when Black Friday hits, everything changes, right? The reality fundamentally changes. But for me, I was still sort of stuck in that earlier reality where I'm just like a crusher and I need to be playing everything as high as possible because I'm crushing. And
I mean, it was shocking. There was shock. I remember thinking like, oh, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be that big of a deal. But it was just like the shock of the situation. The reality hadn't fallen on me yet until it took a while for the reality of the situation to be like, holy shit, like, it's never going to be the same again.
They're paying out the rest of the world balances like at the beginning, but then, it took them 2 months to get their license pulled. So I just sort of assumed I could relocate and they'd pay me my balance as soon as I changed my address to Canada or whatever. But it obviously didn't work that way. And then of course the market fundamentally changed, right? Like once the American market was gone, the whole market shrunk by whatever percent and things got tougher and changed the trajectory for sure.
Yes. Everything really hinged on Black Friday. So you start selling action, you start rebuilding. Do you remember your first score? Like when you first started, getting your feet back under you again after the debacle of Black Friday?
Yeah, 2013 is when I really started to piece it all back together. I had a really good first half of 2013 online. I crushed. I think I chopped the Sunday 500 heads up in January 2013 for like 50K or something. That was my first post Black Friday, like fully rebuild score. And then from there, I was able to string together a number of scores in the first 6 months of 2013. I think I went on a decent sized heater, like 150K or something like that. So that was enough to rebuild. And then in the summer of 2013, we moved here. And, once I moved here, I started off pretty well from here. It was a nice life adjustment for us to move to Amsterdam.
What do you make of online poker, the landscape right now? It's
hard to say because there's so much going on this year with the coronavirus and like the economic devastation and everything. It's just hard to know what is like an organic trend of online poker and what is all these like extra things coming in,
For sure.
I don't know. Overall, it seems like there's some positive stuff, like parties trying kind of hard to expand their guarantees and stuff. GG Network is blowing up. I mean, they're really expanding the game to a lot of parts of Asia. So they're definitely responsible for like a lot of growth. So there are reasons to be optimistic. And, the virus obviously gave us a huge influx of new money. I don't know how much of it'll stay. But it's very hard to predict going forward. But I was cautiously optimistic before all of the disruptions of this year. And so far, the disruptions of this year have largely benefited online poker. So we'll just kind of see where it goes from there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely tough to gauge in the U.S. market because we don't see anything, right? Like, I had never heard of GG Poker before Daniel Negreanu became like their ambassador. But apparently that's where all the action is, right? Or just a ton of it.
Huge. I was sponsored by Natural A, which is a skin of theirs for like 2 years, but then they had to leave the Netherlands for regulatory reasons late last year. But it's been a very fast growing network for the last 2 or 3 years.
I've heard their rake on cash game. Can you speak about their rake on cash game? Because I've seen some really bad things.
Weird stuff about that. I don't know. I only played MTTs, so I honestly don't know the details about their cash games. But I've heard that they base your rake back on like how much of a fish they think you are.
Yeah.
Which Stars does to some degree as well. Like actually, when I have losing months on Stars, they'll give me these like rake back challenges, where they basically offer me like 40% rake back for a period. there'll be like, you know, the next like 4K ranking player will give you back 1,600, and they give you these like special offers or whatever. So a lot of sites are engaging in that sort of behavior, and it might be positive in the long run, but I think they should at least be transparent about it.
Yes, there's very little transparency.
Yeah, the GG is definitely like, so there's some stuff. Yeah, you don't know everything about like what's going on. So I'm not really sure, but it's definitely growing really fast, and there's a lot of new Asian players coming in on the network.
I mean, this is the problem, right? Like with no regulation in the US and no structure, no anything, they made the Wild West just even wilder.
Oh, it's extremely wild.
Like I mentioned in a podcast recently that it reminds me of like a wasteland from like Mad Max, that it's just like every man for themselves, everybody, like it's just, it's really tough. And I do think that online poker would boom again if it got legalized and regulated in the US, but that's a giant if, right?
I agree. I mean, if they could start advertising it on ESPN during NFL games or whatever, like they used to back in the glory days, I think we could definitely see a second boom. It's just a big if, like you said.
And the money, like when somebody can just whip out their wallet,
right,
use their debit card to deposit. I mean, that's how
easier,
that's how Poker Bros runs, right? Like that's the only reason why Poker Bros is a thing in the US, and they just crush their players with rake. But that's how people get money on, and it's very, very easy. You don't have to learn how to use Bitcoin. Like,
it's insane to think that the sites even have as much traffic as they do, with the massive hurdles that are required for payment systems. I mean, the traffic could easily just like 5x if you got rid of those.
For sure. And then maybe ACR would crash and never come back if traffic 5x, I guess.
Definitely better servers.
Yeah, that's a mystery to me. I don't remember back in the day in like 2004, 2005 on Party Poker servers crashing during tournaments like ever. I never remember that happening ever. And that was 15 years ago.
I'd love to see historical stats on that sort of thing. If anyone ever kept them, I kind of doubt they did. When did they start tracking like traffic and everything?
I have no idea.
I have no idea either. But now that you're mentioning, it'd be interesting to look back and kind of see like how many concurrent players they had back then compared to now. I wonder what it was.
I'm sure it was just a ton, because Party Poker was it was like the first Black Friday back in 2005 or 2006.
Yeah, I wasn't really playing on Party. I was more on Stars then, so that one didn't really hit me as much because I was still in school. I wasn't playing quite so seriously at that point, but I do remember it shaking up the landscape.
For sure, it was the number one platform in the world, and it was massive. And that was the first time that it was like, that should have been a wake up call to me. That's like, hey, these guys can just disappear. Like these guys can. You're not secure in thinking that you can go to bed at night, wake up, log on, and play online poker, but you just kind of, again, I was 23 years old, so I knew.
Almost biased, man. It's a hell of a thing, man. I mean, especially right now, you don't even know like if you're going to be able to travel to another country or if the streets are going to be run with tanks. You don't know what the hell's going to happen tomorrow. So there's a lot of now's a great time to throw out your normalcy bias for sure.
Yes, it is a weird time that we are living through. Going back to online poker, when you think of joy in your career playing poker, what's the first memory that comes to mind?
Beating Sean Deeb heads up in the Sunday Brawl in 2009. That was my first big score. Because like I was saying before, I always had these like 30K scores, but I never had like the 100K score that really like gives you that solid foundation to build from, as an MTT player. So in summer of 2009, I got heads up against Sean Deeb in the Sunday Brawl on full tilt. First was like 83 or 90K or something like that. It was very big. And, he always thought I sucked back then because I wasn't very good, to be fair, but like nobody was. And he was the best at MTTs, but he always thought I was like especially bad. And I was very weak and like nitty back then. But I got to the final table with him, and then I was playing really hard and like aggressive that day because I had like recently made some evolutions in my game. We wound up getting heads up, and I had a lead. I was up 3.2 million to 2.8. I remember the stacks very well. And I offered him an even chop because I knew he was better than me. And he just types LOL in the chat. I'm like, all right, well then fuck you, buddy. So it took me 15 minutes, and I beat him, and that was just like the best feeling ever.
What did it feel like when you took down Sean Deeb?
It was just so like vindicating, and it was like in the middle of the World Series. All my friends were there watching because it was in the middle of the WSOP in the summer. We were in the backyard of some like shitty rental house in Vegas we were staying at. It was great, man. That's like why you play the game and stuff like that.
So you had like a live Twitch stream going, just all your
pretty
guys,
much, yeah.
everybody standing behind you cheering.
5 people, but yeah, it was an early version of the Twitch stream, I guess.
Yeah, the more primitive version of Twitch.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the most unexpected thing that's come from your poker journey?
Probably moving to the Netherlands. I mean, that's pretty random, right?
That is pretty random.
Grow up and think like I'm going to move to the Netherlands when I'm 25, but that's what we did. So I mean, I'm glad I did, especially now. It seems like a great time to be abroad, and just past all the recent stuff, like the quality of life, and just the like walkable nature of the cities. Everyone rides bikes and stuff. It's just like a really different lifestyle, and it's really good for raising kids, especially. So I think that like the happy accident that I wound up moving over here because of Black Friday has actually wound up being like a very interesting life change, and I think has led to a lot of positive developments.
Do you have kids? Do you have kids now?
Yeah, they're almost 4 and 2, just shy of that.
Has it affected poker at all? I assume no, just the same.
I mean, yeah, my wife is full-time mom, which helps a lot because that way we can work together to deal with the kids, but she can take the majority of it. So my poker has changed some. Like I can't just like fire up sessions as casually as I used to, like during the day or whatever. But so I'm a little bit more regimented about like when I'm playing versus when I'm not playing. Whereas back in the day, I could just kind of open my laptop and just start playing whatever I wanted. And then I also started the Twitch stream around the birth of my son in 2016. So it sort of made me get a little more serious about like the business end of things and having other income streams as well.
How has Twitch been as far as generating other revenue streams? Like, tell me about your Twitch journey.
So I wanted to start Twitching because I felt like I was the second person, or I was going to be the second person to ever hit 10 million in career caches. But I felt like nobody ever heard of me despite that. And I was like, well, that seems kind of silly. Like maybe I should try to raise my profile a little bit, maybe get like a sponsorship from a site or whatever. And I also thought it was like kind of a good way to reconnect with a lot of my friends from back home, because I had a lot of friends who played poker with me until Black Friday hit, and they weren't at the level required to justify like leaving the country. It's a pretty big commitment to like move abroad to keep your career going. So obviously you have to be like very sure of it to do that. And I had a lot of friends who were playing poker, but they weren't playing it at a high enough level to justify that or whatever. So it was sort of a way to reconnect with them as well. It's like you guys can watch me play and kind of see how the game works nowadays. We can just like hang out online if you're bored or whatever. So that was a motivation for me as well. When I started, it blew up pretty fast. I had like 300, 500 viewers right off the bat, like pretty consistently. And there was a lot of hype around the stream when I first started. So it was pretty easy for me to like really dive into it. Over time, things slowed down a bit, especially when I got the Natural Base sponsorship. I had to start showing all my action on the GG network rather than the other tables. And I guess people are more interested in seeing some other stuff like stars is just like more naturally showable on stream. So my viewer numbers have dropped off a little bit over time, but now that I'm focusing more on just streaming deep runs, they're back up to being pretty good again. So I guess it was like a lot of momentum at first. It went really well. Definitely raised my profile. I got some announcing gigs. I got some sponsorships and stuff. And now that we have 2 kids, and now that I'm trying to like study more to stay more on top of the game itself, I haven't been streaming as much, but it's still a nice outlet. And it still has pretty good support when I do fire it up.
For any listener who wants to start a Twitch stream, a poker stream, what wisdom could you share with them?
Consistency is the number one thing, and you got to be ready to like really grind it out because it helps to build a following if you're on every night consistently, talking to people, making friends and stuff. People come back and they fall into habits, so the most important thing is consistency. But the other thing you really want to do is find some sort of angle, because there's just a bazillion poker streamers now, especially like way more than when I started. So it's important to have an angle. I had a pretty easy angle. I was the second person who was going to hit 10 million in caches or whatever. So that was like a cool thing for people to follow.
Who was first?
Mormon. Yeah. I'm actually like number 10 all time or something. A whole bunch of people leapfrog me since then because online high stakes nosebleeds have just like blown up, like that GG stuff you were talking about. They're playing they're running 25Ks every day. Like you're not going to keep up with career caches with people who are playing 25Ks every day. But it was cool to get there second when it was available.
Yeah, I had Ape Styles on, and
he's the best.
He was saying how they were firing the 25Ks pretty much every day and like multiple bullets, and guys, the player that the tournament was built around would fire like 300K in these silly tournaments and stuff. I think he won like he had added 4 million to his resume in like 2 months. Like.
Not surprising. I mean, that's kind of why GG is successful though, because like they know a lot of the Macau guys like personally, they're willing to do shit. Like we'll start an entire series of 25Ks just to cater to this one guy. I mean, that's just kind of the type of stuff you have to do nowadays, I guess, to keep the action going, especially at that level, because one super whale can keep a lot of those tournaments alive.
Yeah, one super whale makes it profitable for, the other. I don't know how many handed you play on GG Poker, whether it's standard 8, 9.
I think 8 for those higher stakes ones. I'm pretty sure it's 8.
Yeah, the other 7 players are profitable poker players when that guy is sitting down.
The rake is minuscule at that level too. It's 25K plus. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's a very small percentage compared to what rake is for most MVPs.
Yeah, that's typically how it works. It's funny, the higher stakes you play, the less relative rake you end up paying.
Oh, I mean, in many ways, the like upper mid stakes are the toughest, right? Because if you go to the true nosebleeds, you get whales, and you get these like Silicon Valley tech CEOs who are like, they just want to play for a lot of money. Like they're not necessarily good. So it's actually like the upper mid stakes, especially online, is kind of like the toughest thing you can be in. Like to go to the very top is actually a lot easier. It's just hard to have the bankroll and the connections to get there.
Yeah, I mean, because there's the barrier to entry is so massive, right? Like to play at 25K, I mean, the barrier to entry is just huge. So you have either the crushers or people who are good at raising money and selling action and that side of the game. And then you have some whales who drop in. So a shallow player pool and typically weaker, whereas the higher upper end of mid stakes, you got a lot of people that can afford to play in those tournaments. And so the field is just by nature stronger. That's why, it's always is kind of ironic to me how, you play 500 no limit. There's tons of regs. You move up to 2K and like the games are just as good or better at 2K than.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very much so. People are surprised, You look at the very highest games, and or like the $1 million tournaments in Vegas or whatever. Like that tournament's got a bunch of regs in it, but you have to have $1 million to get in there, and you have to like not be losing so much against the regs that you're still beating the field. It's a tall order.
Yeah, for sure. What does your process look like for regularly improving your game?
I do a lot of DTO poker, which is the training app. I don't know if you've heard of it. I'm sure you have by now. I mean, you're doing a bunch of interviews and stuff, but so it'll just show you can dive deep into spots. There's like 40 different spots you can choose from with different like positions and blinds, and you can just run a whole bunch of them. And so like that's a very convenient way for studying when you have kids, especially because I can just take them to the playground. I can bust out my phone. I can just run a bunch of sims while they're playing or whatever. So it's super efficient in that regard. And then for deeper study, I get coaching from BBZ. Like I try to do once a week. During a scoop, I drop the ball a little bit, but we do some coaching and content together. So I definitely like do a lot of studying with him. And then I'm also in a few like Discord chats and stuff where we share sims and stuff like that. So
BBZ is a coaching group, stable?
He runs a stable, but he also does coaching. I'm not in a stable. I just pay him for coaching, and then we collaborate on like videos and stuff.
Nice. How important do you think it is to have a poker coach?
Oh, it's incredibly important. I mean, it's like, unless you're the type of person who's just like super detail oriented and capable of looking at your own stats and hand histories with their critical eye. I mean, many people do have that, especially people who naturally gravitate towards poker. They will have that ability to be honest with themselves and have the ability to like really look into stuff. But for most people, they just kind of play and they just play. And like, it really helps to have someone look into your stats and be like, hey, you're like bleeding a bunch of value here. You're deviating here. You need to do this. You need to do this, just having a second person who knows like what things should look like, who can go through your stats and kind of tell you where you're deviating and what you can improve. I think it's very, very beneficial, especially when you consider the compounding returns of even a small improvement in your win rate over the course of however many hands you're going to play. I mean, like the returns on studying or getting coached are just like boundless, basically.
Can you explain basically on the compounding effects? Can you break those down? Like, so coaching adds X win rate to your tournament ROI.
Yeah, it's hard to give an actual but let's just say you win one more big blind per 100, right? Last month, I think I played like 50,000 hands. So, if you win another big blind per 100, that's quite a few extra big blinds over the course of 500 extra big blinds over the course of the month. And, that's going to add up. That's just 1 month. Over the course of the year, that's a shitload of extra big blinds. And I'm not sure exactly how that translates directly into ROI, but with the amount of volume I'm playing, especially, I mean, if you're not quite as much of a volume grinder, you're not going to see the same return. But if you're playing any sort of big volume over the course of a large sample, a marginal increase in win rate will yield incredible dividends.
For sure. And a lot of times too, it's hard to know what you don't know. And I cover this a lot with my students and people that ask me questions about poker. And it's like, Well, if you record a video and send me the video and I ask you to make timestamps, you'll make timestamps on the spots you think you're struggling in. Right. However, when we watch the video back, we're going to find 10 other spots that you didn't even think twice about that are also spots that you need to work on. So just having somebody else who can discern that for you is so important, because
that's a huge point. Yeah. I find that a lot when I'm doing sessions with BBZ. I'll just kind of be like going through hands quickly, and I just like blast past something. He's like, wait, stop there. Like, we got to look at that. And then he'll explain why I'm just like, need to be considering another option or whatever. It's like, oh, I never even would have thought of that. And without a coach, you're never going to hear about that. So that's a very, very good point.
What do you think the most high impact action folks can take is to improve their game?
Good question. I guess just finding a network of good players to help you improve and like talk ideas with is probably the best like investment of time you can get. Like joining a stable or just like forming a group of your friends who are all trying to study and improve as well. I think those are very good. But in terms of like your own, I guess just honestly, I think DTO is one of your best returns on time. It's incomplete, right? Because they only solve for a few bet sizes and they only solve for a few particular spots. But if you really dive into a spot, you run 200 hands on that spot, you'll really get a great idea of like which boards you want to do what on, which boards you want to bet big, which boards you want to bet small, which boards you want to check raise more, that sort of thing. So honestly, I think in terms of like return for your time, just like mashing DTO is probably the highest EV. But if you want to get some deeper study, then having a study group or a coach is going to be very beneficial as well.
If you were to lose all of your connections that you have in the poker world today, you're a brand new human, but you have all your knowledge, how would you go about building that network from the ground up?
I guess, probably like getting back would be the easiest thing. But if you're a completely new person with no connections, that's probably a little bit difficult. So, there are some websites you can join the Discord communities of, like a lot of these websites like Upswing, Raise Your Edge, DTO, they all have very like active Discord communities that you can join and talk strategy with. And then once you've sort of built up a bit of a reputation that way, I guess you could seek backing. But honestly, like working your way up from micro stakes might not be the worst option either if you're willing to be diligent about it and grind. Like a lot of these guys have successfully done bankroll challenges, starting with like $100, running up to 5K or whatever. And if you're willing to like actually adhere to bankroll requirements and actually be diligent about it, I think you could probably like compound a bankroll from a relatively small amount within a fairly short period of time.
Yeah, I think so too. It's tough for the new person starting out with no connections. And
it's very tough. Yeah, it's not easy.
I say the same thing. It's like find a network. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Find those 5 people, but people are like, I don't know how to. I don't know where to get started. Where do I go to find these people?
Connected to some of these coaching sites is probably a great starting point, I think.
For sure. If you, pay the whatever it is for Upswing, whatever it is for learnpropoker.com, $40 a month, you just get plugged into a ready-made network, and then you just engage people and try to offer value and try to ask questions, and people who see themselves in you are more than willing to give you feedback and help you out for absolutely free. I found when it comes to poker strategy, people are very, very generous in their time and their energy answering questions.
Yeah, part of that is because teaching helps you learn as well, right? So if someone's asking you questions and you're kind of like trying to answer them, it can help you make new connections for yourself and help you sort of reinforce the things you need to be thinking about. So I found that like coaching actually is one of the best ways to learn for me.
Yeah, it is 100%. It is. And also for me, I don't know about you, but when you're a cash game grinder for 15, 16 years, helping people, giving back some to the community is also
that's rewarding. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, it's rewarding.
I have the same feeling helping, like especially like I don't know, some people who are like in the States trying to make it in this new world with like the unregulated markets or whatever. I get extra satisfaction trying to help them sort of navigate the new reality, because I think it's kind of a shame that the U.S. has been short on producing poker talent relative to what we could have done over the last 10 years. A lot of the high stakes, like there are some good American high stakes crushers, but most of them started way back in the day. We're kind of missing a new generation of talent because of like what Black Friday did to our market. And so like helping people sort of navigate what's going on now is something that I get a lot of satisfaction out of.
The only people that are going to make it through right now, through all of the noise, build a name for themselves are going to be amazing. Like they're going to be world-class players, especially in the U.S. market, because
so much tougher now. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to battle. Like you got to battle it at every single turn. And if you make it in the U.S. market, you're going to come out the other side a warrior who's hardened, battle ready. When you moved to Amsterdam, did you find the games? I know the games got a lot tougher, like the tourneys. You mentioned your friends didn't move. Did you struggle off the bat?
Not off the bat. It took until, I think what really happened is when they got rid of the Supernova Elites, everything went to shit at that point because, Stars pulled the rug out from under the Supernova Elites. Was it mid 2014 or 2015, something like that? And that was when I went on the biggest downswing of my career. And the reason was because all these guys who were playing cash, who were playing sit and goes, suddenly went MPTs. And these guys are like way more well studied. They're way better players. They're way more serious, and then all the MPT regs back then were just kind of like holdovers from pre-Black Friday. And we weren't like the whole like solver revolution hadn't really taken root yet in like 2013, 14. So a lot of us weren't studying on the same level. So these sit and go guys, these cash guys come into our games and it's just started making them way tougher than they were before. So that definitely cut into my win rate quite a bit. I think that was a huge factor in why I had a downswing from like 2014 to 15.
Why did the cash games move over to NTTs?
Well, they were making so much money as Supernova Elites with the rake back, right? Supernova Elites like 65% rake back or something like that. It worked out to like over 100K a year in benefits. And suddenly Stars just takes that away. And so what that does is it kills the cash games because nobody's playing that high anymore because they don't get the rake back. And then so the cash guys have to go lower, but then the rake can also raise at the lower cash games. So a lot of them just found it more profitable to leave cash entirely and go to MPTs.
Sad. The downfall.
Yeah, they really, I mean, Stars wasn't making that much. I guess the Supernova Elite paradigm, it sort of locked Stars into this thing where like there were all these like sick regs just grinding it out against each other, and Stars wasn't making as much as they thought they should. But the way they did it, they just kind of like took away everyone's benefits with no warning, basically. So it was kind of sketchy the way they did it. I'm sure you heard about that. It was a while back.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can rehash it if you want for the audience if they don't remember.
I mean, yeah. So basically, the way Supernova Elite worked was you would pay a shitload of rake one year, and it would set you up for 100K in benefits or whatever the next year. And then if you'd have to pay all that rake again the next year to keep it extended by another year. But basically, the idea was you put in your dues this year, next year you reap your rewards. But 1 year, Stars basically just pulled out the next year part of the equation, and everyone had already paid their dues. Everyone had already been paying all this rake under the assumption that they'd be getting a huge refund as a Supernova Elite, and suddenly Stars was just like, no, we're not doing that. So like they could have gotten rid of the program, that's their right, but they should have honored what those people had already earned, and they didn't do that. So that was kind of like drove this whole reaction against Stars, and that's why Stars' reputation over the past 5 years or whatever has really gone to shit. They had a absolutely sterling, impeccable reputation when they got bought out in 2014, 15, and since then it's just tanked.
How do we, as a community, is there any way to band together to put pressure on these companies to cut out the bullshit? I mean, the only way to put pressure on them really is to not give them action, right?
Yeah, people try. The problem is you get in a prisoner's dilemma, right? Because like, let's say like the 100 best regs on a site all say, fuck it, we're going to boycott. We're not going to play here because you guys are like screwing us. Well, then that creates a huge opportunity for the next tier of regs, right? They can all jump on and take all the money that the top 100 regs are foregoing by not playing. So, and the other thing is the sites don't want winning players. They don't want us.
Oh, of course not.
Regs are like an inevitable consequence of running a poker site. They're not a desirable outcome for a site. Like you want a few winners so that you can be like, oh, look at these huge winners. You want a dream that people can chase or whatever. But you'd rather have all your winners be luck and not skill, right? You don't want people who are routinely taking money out of your site like regs are. So it's very difficult for regs to exert pressure on the poker sites because for the one, it's hard for us to band together and because of the incentives involved, and for the other, they just don't care. We just don't have that much leverage over them. Yeah,
it would have to be the rec players as well. Like you would have to be collecting the rec players and not just the pros. Because like you said, I've had meetings with poker corporations and they've basically been like, yeah, like, we don't want people like you. Like this is like, we don't want winning players, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right.
Yeah. So like it would take someone like Negroni who could actually influence like recreational opinion to lead a boycott to make that happen. But he hasn't. I understand why. I'm not trying to like say he's like, a bad person for not doing it. I understand why he hasn't done it. He's subject to the same incentives as the rest of us. But it would really take someone with that sort of clout in the community to sort of lead a coordinated effort to make sites change their practices. And I don't see anything like that happening.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle. That's just likely never going to happen. It's unfortunate because it puts poker players in a situation where they just continually get fucked. And what do? We just eat it.
Yeah, I mean, we're all just fucking each other, so the nature of the deal. So you just try to get fucked less than you do the fucking, I
guess. What's something you feel folks who are chasing their poker dreams don't spend enough time thinking about?
I guess just studying. I mean, that's kind of a cliche answer, but the thing about poker is there's no secret sauce, right? It's just a combination of all these tiny little details and tiny little decisions that all add up, and all these little percentages and all these tiny little 1%, 2%, 3% edges all over the place that you can pick up. And, the more of those you pick up, the better you're going to do. The more of those you leave on the table, the worse you're going to do. And honestly, you just got to dive into the details and just really consider all of that as much as you can, and just always be trying to improve on all the little things that you can improve on. The other thing, I guess, is just bankroll management, because everyone sucks at that.
What do you mean by that? Everybody sucks at bankroll management.
Especially in MTTs, people will hit a score and then they immediately move up. And it's like they don't understand just how big of a skill jump the buy-in levels can be. I mean, I'm guilty of this as well. I'll hit a score and I'll suddenly start playing like a buy-in level higher than I have been. And then, I'll have a bad week or two and I'm like, wait, I should probably drop back down until I've studied more or whatever. So I think bankroll management, especially in MTTs, is a very common weak point for a lot of players. And that's something that people should probably be erring way more on the conservative side than they are.
So basically, you have a bankroll requirement, right? You bink a tournament, and technically using your bankroll requirement, you can move up in stakes.
Yep.
However, because the skill level is different from where you're at right now, you need a bigger bankroll to be able to sustain playing at the bigger stake, right? Is that what you're saying?
Your ROI is going to drop when you move up, and people don't always. They might even drop so far that it goes negative, in which case you shouldn't be moving up. So I think it's very important to consider the potential, the combination of an ROI drop and a higher buy-in inflates the variance in ways that people don't account for, I think, and that's very important to pay attention to.
How do you navigate moving up then? What's a good way to go about it?
Just be super conservative about it, I guess. Just take shots. And one thing you can do is if there's a tournament you want to play that's a higher buy-in than you're used to, you can look it up on SharkScope for the previous days and see what the average ability level of the players in it is. Ability on SharkScope is kind of a flawed metric. I don't even know exactly what it captures, but it captures something. And so let's say you normally play a 55 ABI and you're like, all right, I want to play some 109s or 160s today. What you should do is look at the tournaments you want to play, look at the lobbies of that tournament on previous days and see how tough it is. And if it's soft, then take your shot. If it's going to be tough, then don't. One of the worst things you can do is move up in buy-ins and target tough tournaments. If you're going to move up in buy-ins, you should at least be making sure that you're playing in bigger fields, softer fields, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a greatness bomb right there. Scope out the games that you're going to play in to see if the skill differential is major. And if it is...
Surprised, yeah. Because if someone explained it to me this way, which makes a lot of sense, think of an $11 tournament. Everyone's going to play the Sunday Storm. Everyone's going to play the Sunday Storm. It's an $11 tournament, huge field, huge prize pool. Everyone's going to play it. Then you go up to the Big 22. It's also a big field, a big prize pool, but some percentage of those players from the Sunday Storm will not make it up to the Big 22. And then you go up to the Big 44. Some percentage of them won't make it up, and so on and so forth. And in every jump, the percentage of players who won't make it up are all recreationals. So at every jump, you lose X percent of recreationals. And I think people don't consider just how substantial the ramifications of that can be when it comes to your ROI and your bankroll management.
Yeah, I mean, it's classic Pareto principle where 80% of your winnings come from 20% of the players. The 20% of the players are the recs, and you get fewer and fewer of them each step of the ladder that you move up.
Yeah, exactly.
What's some common poker advice you hear that you completely disagree with?
That's an interesting question. I'll have to think about that. I'll get back to you.
All right.
I got to think of a good answer to that one.
If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about poker, besides restoring poker in the U.S., what would it be?
Lowering rake across the board, I guess. I think they rake too much, and I just don't see the need for you're not even paying dealers. Why are you raking 9% out of every MDT? That's absurd. I mean, and the sites all do it because that's just sort of what the industry standard is, and they can get away with it. But I just can't imagine that that's what is required or what the optimal competitive amount would be if they were forced into a truly competitive free market. So I have to assume that the rate could be lower than it is. And then I guess just making payment processors more reliable and easy would be the other thing.
They don't have to because there's nobody forcing them to do it, right? There's no
break,
there's no coalition. They're all going to maximize. They're all going to maximize their earnings as a corporation. That's what they're built to do. Right. So we just can't. It's more marketing costs, I would say, than server costs or anything.
Marketing costs are probably more of it, and then just executive bonuses and stuff like that,
and research and development. Research and development is probably pretty big. Like, I feel like there's so much room for innovation when it comes to just the type of games that are offered. More innovation as it relates to policing real-time assistance and bots and all of those shenanigans, but it's expensive. And
stuff behind the scenes we're not seeing all of, so we don't really know. But it just seems like there should be at least more competition on that regard. It's like a site should be able to say like, hey, we're lowering our rake, and like people should flock there. That's like not at all the situation right now.
Yeah, because I think recreational players don't care about the rake. And that's it. Again, we go back to incentives. The recs don't care about the rake. The regs go where the recs are. Therefore, everybody goes to the place and they pay the rake, and that's just the way it is.
Right. Yeah, so it's unfortunate. We're trapped in a number of just like prisoner's dilemmas in the poker industry, and I don't really see a good way out of any of them.
Tell me about the prisoner's dilemma. Can you explain? It's a thought experiment?
Yeah, it's a game theory concept where basically you have two prisoners, and they are both promised a deal if they defect on the other one, like a better deal if they defect on the other one, right? So each one, so there are four possible outcomes, right? If neither prisoner defects, that's the best outcome, because then neither one of them is going to be charged with anything, right? If one defects and the other does not defect, then the one who defected gets rewarded and the one who doesn't defect gets punished, which is a net worse outcome, but it benefits the one who defects. And that there's two possible permutations of that. There's two prisoners, and the other permutation is they both defect and they both confess. And that's the worst because then they both get thrown in jail, right? And so the way the prisoner's dilemma works is both people always wind up defecting because that's just the way that their individual game theory matrix plays out. So like even though you would have a better outcome if they cooperated, it's impossible to guarantee cooperation because there's no mechanism for encouraging it to be repeated cooperation. Therefore, they defect, and that you get the worst outcome. And that's sort of what we see in poker a lot of the time.
Yes, this is perfectly encapsulated by that Venetian tournament that ran, I think it was last year, where it was like 300K guaranteed period. And if it goes over, we're not adding the money to the prize pool. And they met the guarantee, which was very sad to me. But it just said that, like, no matter, and it was the Venetian too, of all places. Like, that's just, Sheldon saying, fuck you guys, I can control everything that you do. It doesn't matter. If I give you value, you're going to show up. And that's just the way it is. And
like humiliation, honestly. I mean, they're all just like, yes, sir, please.
Yeah, it is humiliating, right? Like we can't even stiff it to this one guy. Like we're so obsessed with getting some value.
Public enemy number one of the whole fucking community, and we still just bow down to him. Yeah, it's a sad situation.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, but when I look at that as like a microcosm of just the poker world, it makes me very, very sad for good things happening down the pike, because that goes to show you, like, we're incentivized by value, and that's it. Yep. Nothing else really matters.
Honestly, we're lucky things are as good as they are, probably.
Oh man, that's a hard thing for me to even digest. If you could gift all poker players one book to read, what would it be and why?
Mathematics of Poker. Dry as hell, but I found it very useful because it's not based on one particular game. A lot of the strategy books from that era have aged very poorly, and Mathematics of Poker is just about the game theory superstructure of poker games and how you should think about them and like what you should be thinking about, like maximizing your edge, that sort of thing. So I found that book to be by far the most useful book I ever read about poker, and because it just sort of gave me the framework for thinking about like how I should be breaking down spots and how I should be analyzing them, as opposed to just like, reading some book that was like, oh, you should like open kings from here but not here, or whatever the specific knowledge of the time was back then has aged very poorly. But yeah, mathematics has aged pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it's like former Chasing Poker Greatness guest Matt Hunt said that poker is a mathematical game and it's taught verbally, and lots of things get lost in translation when you're trying to teach things verbally. I've had the thought to myself recently, like, why do we even say under the gun? Why is under the gun a thing when like under the gun at 9 max is totally different than under the gun at 6 max, right? Yeah. It's just totally different positions, and we're like under the gun +1. It's kind of silly that it's not just something else, like the 1 seat, 1 through 9, and then you have ranges for 1, and when you're playing 6 max, you're automatically starting at 4, right? So you're opening the 4 range. But Anyway.
That's a great point about the verbal versus mathematical. Yeah. I mean, humans are generally just like verbal narrative creatures, and poker is a very mathematical game. And that's why it's so profitable, right? Because the human brain just does not naturally lend itself to like probabilities and mathematics the way poker works.
For sure. And Matt made another great point. He said that he has a theory, he can't prove it, that based on different languages, different languages are going to breed different styles of poker players because languages are different and how they're structured.
That's really interesting. I never thought of that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like Scandinavians are crazy, and maybe it has something to do with the language and how they, just how they speak and discuss poker strategy compared to different languages.
Yeah, as well. Portuguese, who knows, man? But yeah, it seems to be that there's definitely like a regional difference based on different countries, and maybe the linguistics is the root of it.
I mean, seems like it, but who knows? Let's go back to that question. Common poker advice you hear that you completely disagree with.
I'm just trying to think of like common advice that I hear. I guess I'm just like so far removed from like the beginner scene that it's hard to say. I guess just like about like the very beginnerish thing of like not playing bad hands. Like a lot of poker is very much about playing bad hands and trying to maximize them from the blinds and the button and stuff like that. So like, I mean, that's like super basic, but it's one of the things that first pops into mind is just, when you're first learning like a hand chart, you never play like 10-4 suited, that's a trash hand. But like, no, there are actually many spots in which you do need to play with that hand, and you need to learn to think of things in terms of like, I'm going to play this % of my hands rather than think of things in more verbal terms, like you were sort of alluding to what you were saying before.
So the main determiner as to whether or not you put money in a pot is not your hand. This is the
right.
Breaking it down.
Yeah, that's a good way to break. Yeah, range and position and stacks and all that are far more important.
What are some situations where you should be playing any two that you can think of, like in a tournament?
Heads up, sub 25 big blinds. You're supposed to complete the small blind with an A2. I think is like. I mean, there are different sub strategies you can use, but basically the shorter your stack gets, heads up. You switch to 100% pure limp strategy, including your good hands, like your best hands. Maybe not sub 25, but when you get down to like 15 or whatever, I'm pretty sure that's the way it works. I mean, you'll have some shoves too when you get short enough, but there are spots where you're supposed to just limp with like literally 100%, and you have traps in there obviously because you're limping with your best hands as well, and that way that'll enable you to also complete with like 2-5 offsuit and stuff like that. Because when your heads up, you get the button, so like you're at the small blind and the button, right? So you're going to have position post flop, but it behooves you to play as many hands as possible. So like,
and you're under the gun,
right? You're everything all at once.
Yeah, it makes sense. Obviously, later formations, smaller people, you have to start playing wider. When you start playing wider, you have to limp your stronger hands, because if you only limp your weaker hands, then you're going to be very exploitable. And a lot of things in poker are just adapting to the person that you're playing against, understanding where they're falling apart, and then taking advantage of that, right? Like in some situations, the cards genuinely do not matter.
Right.
Some spots are just plus EV. So your job is to find those spots and then take action when you find them.
Yeah, especially live, that can come up a lot. People, that's part of like studying too, is like part of, especially with deeper stacks. And I'm sure you see this a lot in cash games, is like something you can do when you're playing poker is kind of catch your opponent like a contradiction, right? Especially in cash, you can catch them in these spots where it's like they've showed up at the river and they can just never have the top X% of their range. So suddenly you can just put in like these giant overbets and they just can't do shit about it. And like, so sort of catching your opponent in these contradictions where you can really exploit them is like one of the goals of studying a lot. And yeah, the more you do that, the more you know your way around all the game trees, the more you can identify those spots and really hammer people when you have the edge.
And it doesn't have to be super complex, right? Like
no, it doesn't.
In a cash game, you see a player limp raise twice, and then they open raise from early position.
Right.
This tells you a lot. Now you can just start 3-betting them relentlessly because they've taken out the best hands in their range, assuming they're doing it with value, by limp raising. So when they raise, okay, we go after it, right?
Yeah, it's very simple stuff. And that sort of goes back to what I was saying about the contradictions, right? Because good players don't split their ranges like that because they know that it will trap them in a spot where one of their ranges is too weak or too strong, and that they can't play like balanced strategies post flop. But if you're a more recreational player and you are splitting your ranges like that, it does open up opportunities for you to be exploited.
And even good players, like there are many spots where ranges get split.
The deeper you get into a hand, like your example is pre-flop, which is very simple, but like the deeper you get into a hand, you do get these spots on turns and rivers where it's like you check twice and suddenly you just can't have this entire class of hands or whatever. So spots like that are going to be very exploitable as well.
Yeah, those happen deeper in the decision tree. A lot of times in cash games where you get to a river and you're like the way, you just leave yourself open to exploitation. And
you get to these river spots and it's like your opponent can just 4x pot shove and you just can't do a damn thing about it. And it's like, yeah, you guys play a freaking intense game.
Then you start calling, all of a sudden you start calling the 4Xs and they're value betting thinner. And then you're like, oh God, now that I call with this marginal hand, now I'm overcalling in this spot. You have to make an adjustment. And like, it is intense.
Cash is so different because it's like, it's, you get into such deeper study, like that spot you're saying, but like all the spots are kind of the same, right? Because you start with 100 big ones in every spot, and it's always 6 people or whatever. As opposed to MPTs where it's like sometimes you have 150 big blind stack and 120 and 130 and you got to like adjust everything. MPTs require a lot more adjustments on the fly, but the repetitive nature of cash spots enables you to dive so much deeper into them and really learn them inside out, I think.
Yeah, for sure. If you could erect a billboard, every poker player's got to drive past on their way to the casino. What's the billboard say?
I'm trying to maximize the EV of the community as a whole and not my own EV here, right?
Sure.
I guess remember not to play too high. Keep your bankroll in mind. That's probably the number one thing I would give, because playing too high and gambling off your whole roll is probably the number one pitfall of poker players. So I think that's the most important thing to keep it, because as long as you have something to rebuild from, you can always rebuild. But as soon as you bust your bottom dollar, you're just out of the game. Survival is very important. So proper bankroll management has got to be paramount.
Proper bankroll management, and also, like we said, networking, right? Like even if you practice improper bankroll management and go broke, you can still get backing. So
always having a safety net of some sort, whether it's a network or a bankroll or whatever you want it to be, very important.
And the older you get, the more responsibilities you start having. You get a wife, you get kids, everything starts mattering.
Oh yeah. I used to play way more fast and loose with my roll than I do now. That's for damn sure. Much more cautious these days.
You have a lot more to lose.
Yeah.
All right, a couple more questions. We'll call this. What's something people would be surprised to learn you're horrible at?
Surprised to learn I'm horrible at? Chess. I'm not good at chess.
Yeah, me neither.
I never learned it. I was playing Magic my whole childhood, so I never learned chess. But a lot of poker players were very good at chess coming up. I was never any good at it. So
I'm horrible at chess and checkers.
Not good at checkers either, huh? The checkers you could probably learn with the game tree is not too complicated. I think you can learn it with a couple hours of study, but I haven't played checkers in ages, so I actually don't know how good I am.
I played against one of my friends who's basically like a savant, and I had more checkers than him one time in about 50 games in a row at like the Las Vegas airport, and I was like, "Fuck checkers forever!" Like, dude, and when people say like, they're playing checkers and I'm playing chess, I'm like, checkers is fucking hard too, man.
It's not. No, it's solved though, right? Like you can. I think they solved it.
Is it? I'm not sure.
Years ago, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think it was one of the easier games to solve, checkers. But that doesn't mean that it's easy for a human to solve. I'm just saying that it is a solved game as far as like the AI milestones thing goes. Checkers is one of the solved games.
Yes, still very, very difficult.
Tougher than tic-tac-toe.
It is tougher than tic-tac. I solved tic-tac-toe in the 5th grade. This is
tic-tac-toe. A 3rd grader can solve tic-tac-toe. Connect 4 is a little tougher, but you can solve that one too.
Yeah,
but they get progressively tougher as you move up.
I was obsessed with tic-tac-toe. Maybe that's what led me to my poker career. Loving games in general and trying to figure out the theory, like in middle school
and stuff. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Spades was it for me in middle school and high school.
Spades. Is that just like a color shifted hearts, or is that a different game than hearts?
It's different than hearts, but you have a partner. So a lot determines on like how good your partner is. But there's a lot of variance too, where maybe it was like my first lesson in variance, where you get bad cards, you just can't possibly win no matter what you do. So I learned to accept that early on.
It's important for life to learn that lesson, honestly, because there are just spots where you just can't win and you just got to minimize your loss. The MTG is the best transition into poker. Go is the most. They've solved Go as well. I'm just reading the chat here. They solved AlphaGo. They did that like a year or two ago. They ran an AI against like the top Go players in the world, and the AI came up with this completely off the wall, like crazy strategy that no human player had ever tried in thousands of years. and it won like 5 out of the first 6 games or something, just using this crazy ass off the wall strategy. So sort of an interesting AI tidbit. But
yeah, this is what's amazing. Like, this is the benefit of these games getting solved. Like poker getting closer and closer to getting solved. You get to see some of the really out of this world things that the AI is doing that human beings just aren't doing at all.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
I played an AI. I did it on stream. I won 3 out of 5, but the only reason I was able to win is because it was a sit and go format where the blinds increase every 10 hands. So I was able to just basically play very tight for the first couple of levels, and then once the blinds got like 20 bigs each or whatever, I would just aggressively look for flip spots. But if you're forced to play 200 deep the entire time or whatever, it's just unbeatable. Like they had all those heads up pros go against the Libratus a year or two ago, and they just got smashed because an AI at 200 big blinds, they can come up with all these. They can just like 10x pot the turn, and they're doing it with like they're doing it with like a third of a combo, and it's like, how the hell do you ever like range them on that? But they can balance it perfectly because it's an AI. They just calculate it. So like it's ridiculous. The deeper the stacks are, the more ridiculous it is, and it's very fascinating to study.
Of course, and this is one of the reasons why I think bots, when it comes to poker operators and pro players being public enemy number one, like to me, bots should be public enemy number one. Even if they're not as good as the pros, they don't tilt, they have no emotions, and they can just grind it out all day long. Like they have infinite stamina and infinite mental endurance. So they're going to take so much liquidity out of the poker economy.
Plus the idea of like, I mean, people can stomach getting beaten by a superior competitor, but losing to a bot is like a different thing, It's like the whole game was just rigged from the start if you're losing to bots.
And I'm sure we are losing to bots in
a lot of money to bots.
Yeah. A lot of people are losing a lot of money to bots, and real-time assistance too is another issue.
It's hard to fight that. I mean,
No, it drives me crazy. Like I make a bet on the river and it can be like a trivial spot. And then dude's like timing down, going into his time bank. And I'm like, oh my God, like they're just constantly going into their time bank in somewhat trivial situations. And it's like, oh, they're just
running sims on the side.
They're just looking it up. Or it's not that they're running sims.
They don't even stop you, right? Like stars, if you open PO solver and you have stars open, it gives you this whole message. You can't run PO, blah, 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 it yells at you. But like any other site, you just fire it up, doesn't even care.
Or you could just run a shitload of sims that are searchable and then search them in real time, so you don't have to wait on the solver to do its thing. I mean, that's the
more practical method.
Yeah, that's the more practical. I'm teaching people how to cheat. That's great.
This is not the intent of this podcast.
Yeah, this is not the intent, but like this is what's going on, right? So like,
oh, it is absolutely, and it's hard to stop because you can stop someone from, even if you make it effective to stop them from running software. They can just have their laptop open. They can be on a cell phone with their coach or their friend. I mean, it's unpoliceable at some point.
Yeah, it makes me feel really sad. I know that there's probably always a lot of this going on, but as we've gotten more advanced with poker software and stuff, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse.
It becomes more and more necessary to be on top of all this stuff, because other people are doing it, and you're just going to get smashed if you're not like studying and at least keeping up with like the learning curve.
And quite frankly, I've mentioned this before, but cheating's incentivized because what's going to happen? Ignition going to come arrest you? Like, are you going to get fined by ACR? Like, what the worst they can do is lock your money up and close your account.
Right.
And so
they can't file charges or anything. They can't even put a black mark on your record. There's nothing.
No, there's nothing.
For some other poker site, they wouldn't even know.
Yeah, of course. And a lot of these places don't even have know your customer. So you can just make infinite accounts and get one banned. Who cares? Make another, just like steady as she goes.
I mean, poker's always been the Wild West in some ways, but like, I don't know, the idea of your home game getting held up by some freaking cowboy dude is it's a little different than like getting cheated by a bunch of bots,
Has your home game ever gotten held up by a cowboy dude?
We weren't playing for that kind of money. I'm just talking about the stories you'd read in the Super System and stuff,
For sure. I've never been arrested or been in a game that got busted, but I played in.
I never did any of that. I was always.
I played in a game for 2 years, 2 days a week, and the guy that ran the game pissed me off, so I stopped going. He wouldn't reduce the rake when it was like four-handed and it was like impossible to win. So it's like, fine, like you don't want to do that. I'm playing 14 hours, 2 days a week. Then I'll just not stop coming. And I stopped coming. The next week they got raided by the police. The police shot somebody. Everybody got arrested. It was like a massive, massive news story in my hometown.
Oh, that's intense, man. I didn't even know that sort of thing's going on. Jeez.
Oh yeah, it was. I was very fortunate. I ran very good to avoid that happening.
I got invited to some of that type of stuff back when I lived in LA, or not, I was like just south of LA. So obviously there are all these celebrity games, all this like sketch up. I always thought it was too sketch. I never got into it.
Yeah, that's a good decision. I've played in those too, and they are very sketchy. And
I'm sure you can make some good ass money if you know the right people and it's on the up and up or whatever. And some of the celebrities are blasting away, but like you got to know it's a very underground sort of thing.
Most of them are 5% uncapped rake. So
right. That's how they kill you, right?
Yeah, that's how they get you. I played PLO with Gilbert Arenas one time. He dropped probably $60K and was just potting every hand in the dark, pot the flop, pot the turn, pot the river, like in the dark. That game was profitable despite there still being 5% uncapped rake. But it's most of those places. I mean, you have a legal place to play in Southern California. Like, so if you're going away from a legal place to play to somewhere else, it's most likely just going to be sketchy.
Something's not going to be on the up and up.
Yeah. What's your current big goal as it relates to poker?
I mean, I guess my goals are more like life related than poker related, but I just kind of want to keep winning. I just want to stay on top as long as I can. So I guess just like as many 6-figure profit years as possible consecutively is kind of what I'm aiming for. It's not a huge goal or anything, but it's nice just to, the older I get, the more conservative my goals become, and the more I think about just like security versus like ambition. So yeah, just kind of keep it going, just make enough money to get a house and have my family all situated.
Any thoughts of leaving poker behind eventually, or you still love the game?
Not anytime soon. I don't know what the hell else I do, honestly. I love it, man. I mean, every now and then I'll like not feel like playing and I'll be burned out or whatever, but one day off and I'm ready to get back in there even now. And I think studying a lot helps with that, because there's so many things you learn and there's so many things you want to try, and like, you'll study some spot, you're like, oh, sweet, I've been doing this wrong. Now I can like apply it at the tables the next day. And that process of discovery and application still really speaks to me. So I have no post-poker plans, but it's always prudent to be like planting little seeds everywhere to kind of see if something might sprout and you can jump somewhere else when you need to, because you never know. Like I was saying earlier about the recency bias and normalcy bias, it really is prudent to have backup plans because you never know what will happen.
You need to have redundancies as a poker player, because if time has told us anything, it's that shit can get bad, and it can get bad real quick.
Oh yeah, very fast.
Do you have any projects you're working on that are near and dear to your heart?
I mean, I got the Twitch stream. I do some coaching videos with BBZ. I've been doing some private coaching. I mean, I have a YouTube channel as well, but I haven't updated it in a little bit. So, I mean, I guess the projects have sort of been on the back burner this past year. I've mostly just been focusing on trying to get better at poker and, being the best player I can. But I definitely want to invest some more energy into the Twitch stream going forward here now that the scoop is over. So I think that's something I'm going to try to invest a lot of effort into coming up here.
If you could buy a book for all poker players. Oh yeah, we did that. Mathematics of Poker.
Mathematics.
Yeah. Do you have any? 10%
of them would read it. It's dry as hell. Did you ever read it?
No, I did not read it.
It's like reading a dictionary or something. But it's
did you ever get that Tom Chambers PLO book that was like selling for $2,500?
Was it in PDF form or was it like a physical book?
I had a physical version. I'm sure there was a PDF version as well, but I did have the physical version.
PLO. So I remember reading some PDF that was getting shared around, but I don't think it was that one. I think it was the cheaper one.
There are like 10,000 different grids and solves and so many numbers.
How does anyone wrap their head around that, man? Hold'em is already just like, and then you double the number of cards, which makes the game tree just like 64 times more complicated or whatever the compounding effect of that is. I'm not thinking very clearly tonight, but it's very much more complicated than Hold'em, and Hold'em is already ridiculous. So I don't know how anybody studies that.
Well, I think that lots of people should be trying to learn new games, right?
Yeah,
like trying to expand and learn. And I think PLO is the second most popular out of all the games to learn.
I feel like sort of like I missed the boat on it. Like it would have been great to learn 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but now I don't know if it's worth my time investment relative to just getting better at MTTs. But I mean, it's a fun game, and I definitely enjoy it when I do play it.
That's always the trade-off, right? Like I had the same thing where I didn't fully invest myself in a PLO, and I think that long-term it would have been more profitable. However, it's hard to pass up an hourly rate that you're earning in Hold'em to dedicate 1,000 or 2,000 hours into a brand new game where you don't know what your win rate is. You don't know where your skill level is compared to the people you're playing against. Typically, it's a lot of unknowns to transition and play a new game.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's always tough to leap into the unknown. You value the security. 5-card draw. I think 5-card stud predates 5-card draw, doesn't it? Maybe not. I know 5-card stud is the game they played in all the old movies. I'm just reading the chat here. You know if 5-card stud predated 5-card draw? I always played 5-card draw in like middle school, but if you watch those movies from like the 40s and 50s, it's all 5-card stud, which is just a miserable game. If you think each player gets 5 cards and you don't get to trade any of them in, only one of them is face down. It's a terrible game, but I guess it was good enough for the movies back then.
Yeah, movies. I've never seen an accurate poker movie ever. So.
They're all ridiculous. Like if you go, I mean, there are YouTube videos breaking down the hands from rounders and stuff, but they're betting like 15x pot on the river and just this nonsense,
But they had to. Like I had Brian Koppelman on the show, and when I was researching it, it used to annoy me too. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, man, that'd be a shitty movie scene if like KGB and Mike McD just played heads up for 10 hours straight. Like,
I mean, you portray the reality of it because it's like way too, it's not interesting to watch someone play heads up for 10 hours straight. But
right.
It is funny as a professional to see the way that hands are portrayed in movies. And you're just like, that is not at all what happens, but all right.
Which makes me question how all the things are portrayed in movies that I don't know about, that I'm not so immersed in. It's like,
same effect with media. So I think Michael Crichton coined this term where it's the wet streets cause rain effect, where you read a story in the newspaper about something and you're like, wow, they got everything wrong about this story. I know this subject and they're just completely wrong about it. And then you read something about some other subject and you just assume that it's true, but like actually they don't know anything about anything.
Yeah. Kind of like they don't know anything about anything. That's a good place to call it. Brian, where can the Chasing Poker Greatness audience find you on the World Wide Web?
I am B Paris Poker on all the sites, but the sites that I update the most are Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. So I haven't updated YouTube in a couple months because they were doing this whole demonetization thing, but we'll get back on there in a little bit. We'll be posting a video of my million win from a couple weeks ago.
What do you mean demonetization on YouTube? What was the deal with YouTube?
A bunch of gambling videos, poker videos got taken down. Jeff Bosky, the ACR pro streamer, YouTube guy, he got a whole bunch of videos demonetized. His whole channel got shut down and deleted because of like gambling violations or something. I don't even know exactly what was going on with it. The Gelman amnesia thing, thank you. But yeah, I'm kind of waiting for that storm to subside. I've heard that Jamie Staples and some of the other prominent guys have talked to YouTube and they've kind of figured it out, and it's supposedly not going to happen again going forward. So I might get back on the YouTube tip, but that is what I was referring to.
Yeah, welcome to the poker world, all you YouTubers.
We're always afoul of the law somehow.
Yes, we're like the worst part about this is I hate being in gray areas. I just want to do something legitimate, and I don't want to lie. I just want to be on the up and up, and yet in poker has forced me to just fucking embrace all this fucking
gray areas, man. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I get the idea that a lot of the corporate and real world is gray areas as well. So I don't think
it's true. Yeah, it's made me examine black and white a lot more. Like, what is black and white, right? Like absolutely. when I think about it, poker is a great version of a meritocracy that's probably more pure than the corporate and business world, right? So
because the people who work the hardest and the people who are the smartest just naturally rise to the top. I mean, there's also the element of luck and like when you got into the game and who you met and who you knew and whether you hit this big score and all that stuff. But I think that it is much more of a meritocracy than many fields.
No matter how well you run or how bad you run when you're starting out your career, if you just keep running, you will eventually find success if you're driven, smart, motivated, curious. You can't help but be successful in poker, no matter how many times you get pushed down.
Completely agree.
Man, it's been great having you on. I'm gonna call the show and respond to some of these Twitch comments who are calling me a copy of RYE. And
don't worry about my chat, man. They're all trolls in there.
Yeah, that's Twitch. That's Twitch for you.
We love our trolls, though.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Chasing Poker Greatness. If you have yet to subscribe to the show, please take a second to do so on Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite place to listen to podcasts may be. For more content from me, Coach Brad, please visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com/enhanceyouredge, and I'll see you next time.